Our guest today is Jeff Crouere, Louisiana political pundit, author, and host of Ringside Politics radio show on WGSO New Orleans. Also, the member of Louisiana Trump transition team. He joins us today to share his latest book, America's Last Chance. Find out more at jeffcrouere.com or ringsidepolitics.com. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio for our Heartbeat of the World segment. I'm so grateful you can come out here today. You are a Louisiana political pundit, author, and host of Ringside Politics radio show on WGSO in New Orleans. And you've also been a member of Louisiana Trump transition team, as well as writing a recent wonderful book, America's Last Chance. I'm so grateful. One of the things we got from our audience when we put out a survey before we started this segment was, what are some of the things that are bothering you most about what's going on in the world? Some of the things we got back were the frightenedness about what's going on with the Middle East, what's going on with the economy, what's going on with our liberties. And so there's a lot of fear going on, a lot of division going on in the country, but a lot of misinformation. And being that you have a wonderful political show and you've been enlightening your audience, I thought you could come and share some of your great knowledge and wisdom with our audience. But before we go to all of that, share a little bit about your background with our audience.
Oh, well, thanks so much. I grew up in New Orleans and live on the North Shore of New Orleans right now in a little town called Mandeville. My show is based in the city. We do a 4-hour morning show called Ringside Politics on WGSO radio, and do a weekly TV show on WLAE TV, which is a PBS affiliate in the New Orleans area. And last year, wrote my first book called America's Last Chance. As a person that had been involved in politics for many decades, I was convinced that the 2016 election was really the country's last chance to turn the government around, to turn the sort of state of ship around in a more positive direction. I was very worried about where we were going after 8 years of the last administration. Mm-hmm. And many, many years, really, of both parties continuing to move in a direction of bigger government, higher taxes, more debt, more globalism. And I really wanted an agenda that was based on putting America first, securing the borders, restoring liberty, lowering taxes, reducing the size of government. Mm-hmm. But I saw that if a candidate like a Hillary Clinton would have won, we would have been moving in the direction of socialism at a breakneck speed. Yeah. And at that point, I didn't know if we could ever turn it around. Like, I don't know if Europe can ever be really turned around the direction they're going. Yeah. So I got involved in the Trump campaign, and fortunately, Donald Trump did prevail. Yeah. But now I believe that the second step, besides getting him elected, is getting his agenda implemented, which will hopefully be what Congress will do in the days and weeks ahead. But we got to keep the pressure on to make sure that they do. So I just started my last project over the last few weeks, was starting my own YouTube channel, which is my name, Jeff Crouere. And I would love people to check it out. We posted a few videos on there on some of these important topics, such as what's going on with our economy, and also what's going on with the media, which I think has done a very, very poor job of reporting and covering the new president. I would give them failing grades. So those are just some of the topics we discussed on the YouTube channel, and it's a link is at my website, which is jeffcrouere.com.
Wow, that's awesome. What do you feel from your perspective, seeing politics and the way it's gone on? I keep telling people over the years, I got out of the Democratic Party. What was it in? Probably 20 years now. But in my early 20s, I thought socialism sounded like a pretty good deal. I mean, hey, taking care of the poor, get rid of those nasty rich people. But, now growing older, I begin to realize that really government programs and the government taking care of you is really enslavement programs. It's really meant to have the government take care of you forever, never having yourself be self-sufficient and really live and be your full potential in life. And that's not what liberty is all about. And so I dumped the Democratic Party and actually became an independent and said for years I just swore off voting until Donald Trump came along. And it was the first time I voted probably since baby Bush.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let me say this. I think we've seen a lot of real politicians on both sides which really haven't represented change. And we've just seen more and more big government, more and more politics as usual. And I do think Donald Trump is different. And I think he's going to change the way this country is going. So that's the good thing. I think the American people finally woke up and said, we're going to go with a guy who's never been elected to office before. He's a businessman, because we don't like the direction of our country. And maybe I played a little role in that through the book and through the shows. And I'm really hoping that now we have the courage to follow through on this agenda, which is not going to be easy to implement because there are a lot of very entrenched, very powerful forces that want to stop it.
It's amazing to me, Jeff, because it's amazing also how misinformed the public is, and a good part of that is to mainstream media, and that's also why they're so frightened by the non-mainstream media, which is folks like you and me, and many other folks out there who have become awake and start to engage and look out into the world and say what's really going on here, and then just put it out there to people for them to be their to educate themselves and make their own mind up. And now in the age of technology, that's the great thing that I don't think the global banking elitists hit on, is that for one, Donald Trump would come along, and then number two, that people would get engaged and make their own decision, not based on mainstream media, but by becoming informed themselves.
No doubt. And that's the great thing about the internet. That's the great thing about alternative media. People are not just subjected to ABC, CBS, and NBC, the evening news, the daily newspaper, the New York Times. I mean, they've got all of these great sources that they can access, and I think it really is playing a major role in waking people up. So I'm pleased by what has been made available to people through all these new sources of shows, information, and media. But the old media, the old establishment media, is not going down without a fight, and they are putting all of their resources into bringing down Donald Trump.
Yeah, they are. And it's interesting for the people who are misinformed, who've chosen to take only the information that's uploaded into their brain by mainstream media. What's sad about it is they've completely convinced that he is the devil in a man's suit. And I'm like, dude, seriously, everything they've contextualized and put out there, the information's invalid. It's untrue. It was untrue during the whole debate section. One girlfriend of mine had a problem with a number of things the media was saying about rape and such, and every single charge of so-called rape was found to be unfounded and untrue. But they're like, nope, it's true, and they don't want to hear anything else. And so what I've gone to great lengths to do is, when if people are listening and they're more leftist leaning, listen, I'm not telling you what to think, neither are any of my guests. Really, I implore you to educate yourself, and by educate yourself, don't just turn on the counterfeit news networks, any of the others. Seriously, right now, as I said to Colonel Mayneth, is that really with this age of technology, you can go all across the world to your internet, average citizens just reporting on what's going on in their backyard, where they don't have an agenda. They don't have ratings. They're just telling you, hey, this is what's going on. And they're sharing the catastrophe going on across the world. So you can make up your own decision and get your own information, not look to the general news to give it to you.
That's right. And more people are doing that. And listen, if people just listen to the mainstream news media, Hillary Clinton would have won in a landslide, because that's all they were getting was really a one-sided, biased account of the election. And if they were just listening to the mainstream news media, Donald Trump's approval rating would be about 3, because the Media Research Center did an analysis of the coverage of President Trump, and it's been 89% negative from the mainstream news media. So his approval rating is, close to 50%. It's not great, but it's not bad considering what he's had to endure. And that tells me people are waking up, people are getting their information from other sources, and now they don't necessarily trust what they see in the media, which is a good thing. Let people go and investigate for themselves and find out the truth.
Yeah, and that's just what's absolutely necessary right now. And it's interesting because the mainstream media even believed its own lies during the election when it was evident that President Trump won. Their faces were like, it was It was amazing.
Well, it was. I mean, they started crying, basically. It was, I mean, that was one of the best nights of television ever to watch these broadcasters, and they were so stunned. I mean, they were absolutely dejected. It was hilarious. They never thought they'd have to say the words President Donald Trump.
Yes. And here's the thing, and I some of my friends were appalled here in New York that I was voting for, but I said, you know what, it's because you've listened for years. And I tell this to my audience in the past. I stopped picking up a newspaper and listening to the news, mainstream news, over 20 years ago. I started to see some of the news stories that were covered, and they would take nonsense and sensationalize it and make big crap out of it. And I was like, I'm done with it. I'm done. I'm not picking up a newspaper or turning on the TV to listen to a regular news program or a mainstream news program again. And people were like, well, how are you going to get your news? I'm like, listen, I read. I love documentaries. If something's huge, I live in New York City. When World Trade Center came down, guess what? I certainly knew about it. Yeah. And so if it's big enough, you're going to find out about it. I'm an inquisitive mind. I'm always asking people, talking to people, so you can find out without turning on the TV. In the past, before TVs, people were very knowledgeable, probably much more so then than they are today, because today they look to be fed and have the information uploaded into their brain. And we don't need to be puppets. We can totally make up our own mind about what's going on in the world.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I think that's a good thing. A lot of people have followed your lead and also turned off the mainstream news media over the years. And I'm also sick of their worship of celebrities and these people that I think have such horrible values and really are not good role models for people. And they spend a lot of time in talking about these celebrities who, by the way, many of them have threatened the president and engaged in a reprehensible way, and I think really need to be visited by the Secret Service. I know one of them, Kathy Griffin, was supposedly recently visited by the Secret Service, but the mainstream news media loves to elevate these type of people, and I think those are not the ones that should be getting the attention of the American people. Yeah,
and it's quite sad to me. It's kind of the leftist view is kind of like, well, the only view that's the correct and right and loving view is our view, and anything that is not our view is a hateful, intolerant, fearful view, and that's completely not true. All of my conservative friends are not intolerant and non-loving. We're completely loving, and that's hence why we love liberty, because everyone should be able to have their own free will and not have the government be reigning over them. We did away with kingdoms when we left the British Empire and started this wonderful republic. Right. And I'd like to keep it that way.
No doubt. We set a course for independence, and we just celebrated it. And thank goodness we're blessed to live here and to have this great Constitution and Declaration and our founders who are so visionary and I think divinely guided to set the course for this country. And it really irks me to see so many people denigrate the founders and denigrate our history as some sort of racist history and really try to taint in the minds of young people the great heroes that we've had from the past.
Yeah, there's a reason the rest of the world wants to come here. And it's not just money. It's the opportunity to be and do and to have the life you want without a government or a kingdom telling you how to be. To actually live your full gifts and talents that God gave you into the world and to the best of your ability can be done here and nowhere else. That's why everyone wants to come to the United States of America.
Right, but we got to fight to make sure it stays that way and does not turn into one of these socialist utopias, which are really sort of hell on earth. I mean, look at Venezuela, which is a socialist utopia. They don't even have basic services. They don't even have basic supplies. I mean, there's hunger, there's riots, and that's what socialism does. Cuba, I mean, it just fails. Look at the inner cities in this country where you have the big Democrat machines, and you have this liberalism in place, and the cities, many of them are just failures. It's when you get outside of the cities and get in the other parts of the country where I think you have more of a conservative, liberty-minded mentality where I think you see success and progress. So it's clear to me one philosophy equals failure, and the other philosophy gives people at least a chance for success.
Yeah, and it's actually it's completely untrue. It's interesting how they call the leftist sort of thinking liberal, because liberal comes from the word liberty, which is their whole stance on socialism, which eventually goes to communism. It's completely against liberty. It is not for for each individual to have its own rights, inalienable rights. It's really that you're owned by the government. The government tells you how and when and how things should go about. And yeah, you're so-called cared for the government, but not really, because if you look at what's going on in Cuba, the people aren't doing living super large, and neither in Venezuela. But like one guy who came on my show just recently said, I think some people who are leftist leaningly to go to one of these countries for a week or two and come back and realize what they have.
That's a good point, but you have some of these Hollywood stars that go there. Sean Penn comes to mind. Jamie Foxx and others go there and celebrate these tyrants in Venezuela and Cuba, and don't seem to realize the hell that's going on there. And then they come back here and lecture us about how we need to do more to provide more government services and grow our government, et cetera. So I guess some of these people just can't be reasoned with. I mean, they're so indoctrinated into the leftist thinking. But fortunately, I think we got millions of Americans that do see the light. And I'm hopeful that if we can get this agenda through, which we've seen some real good progress in the first 5.5 months, then I think you'll see more success, hopefully, for similar types of approaches. And I've got, my bet on the American people, because I think they confounded the experts in the last election, and hopefully we'll still see that kind of rebellion, positive type rebellion against the establishment in the future.
Well, that's the thing. I think more of the left is really a small minority. They think they're huge because they make a lot of noise. It's like, a child having a temper tantrum. They're making a heck of a lot of noise, so it seems like more of them. But the conservatives are just as it states. They're conservative. They don't need to be violent to break store windows and cause fires in garbage cans in the middle of the street to make their point. They make their point by going out there like we are, just talking to the public and educating, being civil. But, interestingly, I'd like to talk about how the Democratic Party, which has gone super left, has really bought out a lot of the poor. And that's a big problem, because they've been bought out with social welfare programs and such, and they feel that they need these programs. So now they've kind of been indebted to and now married to the Democratic Party based on being bought out. And here in New York, per se, in the Bronx, one of the poorest of the 5 boroughs in New York City, 80% voted for HRC, which horrifies me. And it was interesting going to the polls. I went to some of them and talked to people, and they were like, well, I don't want to lose my social welfare program, because they feel like any Republican that comes in there, oh, there goes my social welfare program. And I said, how about there's a way for not Republican or Democrat, but a person who serves the people, who is here as a presidential official that is voted by the people to serve the people, where they lift you up so you don't need government assistance, that you can actually help yourself. Wouldn't you rather that? I mean, when I really talk to people and really get deep, that's what they want. They just want to be able to feed their family and live the best life they can. And they know that's possible. They choose that, but they don't think it's possible. What do you think the solution is to kind of...
Well, you make a good point. We have a similar dynamic here in New Orleans. 81% voted for Hillary Clinton. And this is a city that has been run by liberal Democrats really since Reconstruction. There's not been a Republican elected to office as mayor of New Orleans since Reconstruction. And the city, for all its great culture and history and architecture and entertainment, is really not a city that thrives on good business or services for the public. You have a high crime rate. You've got crumbling infrastructure. You've got all these problems that really are in other urban areas across the country. And it's just the failure of this type of leadership. And I wish that we could see more outreach to these type of voters, where you'd have Republicans, conservatives try to appeal for their vote, go fight for their vote. I mean, I know you wouldn't be getting a majority, but maybe you get a little bit higher percentage, and then over time maybe work it up whereby you're competitive. I mean, right now, Republicans are not competitive in the urban areas. New Orleans has 0 Republican office holders. And the party had some success years ago, but is really not successful at all. New Orleans is like a blue island in a red sea. The state of Louisiana is definitely more conservative, more Republican, but the urban areas are Democrat, and that's because you have a high minority population in there. Yeah. And you're right; they're just sadly tied to these government services. They think the Republicans are going to take them away, and the Republicans are cruel and evil, and the Democrats are the ones that are looking out for their best interests. And the reality is just the opposite. Yeah. I think the conservatives are those that want people to succeed and thrive and really do well. And the Democrats are the ones that want to just keep them tied to the social welfare programs and to all the various services they're getting, keep them down and oppressed. Yeah. And it's that kind of sad situation that goes on in so many areas around the country. And you see, the heavy support Democrats have in all the urban areas. And you look at what's going on now with climate change. The president got out of the Paris Accord, and you have all these liberal mayors saying that on their own, they're going to defy the president and follow the Paris Climate Accord themselves. That's what our mayor said yesterday. He's also a sanctuary city and welcoming all the illegals here, and come on over. And these are just policies that I think are running counter to what the majority of Americans want, and certainly the Trump administration. So I guess we'll have this dynamic going on throughout the Trump years, where you'll have these liberal enclaves try to fight everything he's doing.
It's just sad, because what it is from their perspective, they think they're fighting for everyone's liberty, when in actuality they're not. Because when you absolutely need for the people to need the government to give them social welfare, you're not free. That's not liberty. You're dependent on them. Who wants to be dependent? It's like they're your mommy or daddy. You really want to be dependent on yourself and have a great job or have a great career or build a business from your own hands and build something great, and have the means to do that. It's interesting how leftist ideology folks will think, well, Republican or conservatives, well, they just care about big business. No, not true. What built this country was small businesses like myself, an entrepreneur. That's what builds the country. I was just telling a story on my last interview this morning about someone who's a career coach, and I told her one of the most inspiring stories to me was a woman who worked in corporate America for 20 years and then got let go. And it was her whole identity. A lot of Americans see going to get that paycheck is, after a while, that job is who you are. You identify with it. You lose that job, you lose a part of who you are, you feel. And so when she lost her job, for a year she's on unemployment, and she's doing great, going on some vacations. But then she's like, now what? I'm never going to get a job again. She started to get really depressed until some of her friends started to point out to her, you make these soups all the time and everyone wants them. Why don't you start selling them? And then she started to make a business out of it. And see, sometimes pushed into adversity without a handout, but a hand up, could actually bring you to a whole new situation where, hey, now you've created a company with your own God-given talents and gifts and brought some value and awesomeness to the world that can be used by people, make the world even that much better.
Well, that's the key. That's what government services are supposed to be. They're supposed to be a hand up to someone that is down for a certain period of time, going through a transition, lost their job. We don't want people to starve on the streets. We don't want people to be destitute. We want to help those that are in need, but it shouldn't be a lifestyle. It shouldn't be something that's passed from generation to generation where no one works. And you're just receiving government welfare, and you're able-bodied and you can work. That's not what these services were initially designed for. It was going to be a temporary assistance where you could get people going again, and then you could get back out there in the workforce. And as your friend did, chart a new course, find a new idea, and then succeed. And that's the great thing about America. We have those kind of stories all the time where people are starting their business, following their dreams, succeeding. Yeah. But I think if we continue down the road of more and more and more oppressive government, those kinds of dreams are not going to be fulfilled anymore in the country. So that's why I'm excited about a businessman being the president, someone who understands business and understands how we need to revive our economy. And I think we've seen some good things for the first few months. We've seen some positive trends as far as jobs. We just had a jobs report out that showed, more people working, and that to me is very positive.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he kicked the bucket before he even got in office. He was kicking butt. He was like, I'm not taking no rest. I know 4 years sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. Yeah. And I've never seen the work ethic and just the drive and passion from any other president in my lifetime. I don't know if any of the presidents way before I was alive put in the same sort of effort and passion, but I've never seen it in my lifetime. And it's just truly amazing.
I have to agree with you. I mean, I think this president is a worker bee, and he goes round the clock. And I think you're right. During the transition, I think it was the most successful transition we've ever had. I mean, he was making deals and creating jobs, and he wasn't even president yet.
Yeah.
And then ever since then, it's been pedal to the metal, and I think that's really been good for the American people, despite what you hear from the Democrats and the deep state and the establishment and the globalists and all the people that are lined up against him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. We were talking a little bit before about the whole idea of government entitlements and such. And I talked to a business owner yesterday, interesting, very small business owner. She's owns a couple of stores and has a couple of employees. And she can't pay a lot because when you're a new business owner, unfortunately, when you're a big corporation, you can afford to pay a better salary. Well, she's a brand spanking new business owner the past couple of years, and so she can't pay all that well. And what's showing up is a lot of people who are millennials who are just like, well, you don't give me that much, so I'll just sit here and be really mean to your clients. And I'm thinking to myself, I told her maybe just do one store and pay them a little bit more because it makes the difference to maybe pay more and have people that don't have a sense of entitlement. And she said, yeah, but it's getting harder and harder to find that, at least here in New York, she said. And I find that sad. And so what would be your suggestion perhaps to really switch the gear on this idea of entitlements? Because like I said on a show a number of months back, when I had become unemployed in my 20s, all my friends said, oh, go get unemployment. It's your right. And I didn't know, a lot of the times American folks have started to see the entitlement program as rights. You should get whatever you can, as much as you can in your bowl, because it's your right, and you should take advantage of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's pushed out there, that, this is a right, that the government should be providing health care for everyone. The government should be providing money for everybody, housing for people. And that's not what our founders envisioned. I mean, that's not what built this country. What built this country was rugged individualism, was that frontier spirit, was people taking chances, entrepreneurs, not people sitting back and expecting a handout. I mean, that's just absolutely counter to everything that has grown this country into the superpower of the world, into the envy of the world, and the country that, as we talk about, people want to come here. Mm-hmm. And it's not to receive government handouts. It's for the opportunity to succeed. Some of the best, most successful businesses are run by people that came here from oppressed countries like Cuba, mm-hmm. and have been able to succeed in this country and take advantage of what we offer. So I think one thing we can do is try to make sure that these entitlement programs that we have are very limited in the amounts that we give to people that are able-bodied. I mean, if people are disabled, if people cannot work, then I think we are a compassionate nation. We want to take care of people mm-hmm. that are in true need. But able-bodied people that can go out there and work, I think should only receive government assistance for a short period of time, and then they're cut off and they have to go work. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think we tried to do in the 90s with welfare reform and the Republicans and Bill Clinton coming together. And it's really been, since that time, diluted. And I think we need to get back to that kind of reform whereby, we give people a little assistance, but if they're able-bodied, we say, hey, you've got to go out there and you've got to work. This isn't going to be a permanent lifestyle for you just to receive government assistance when you have every capability of providing for the workforce.
Absolutely. And let me ask you, Jeff, what would you see as like the top number one threat to liberty in the United States, and what would be your solution to it?
Well, I mean, there's so many, but I would say it would be this expanding federal government is certainly a threat because it has been so unsuccessful. You can't really point to any government programs that work well. And from the post office to the local DMV, you have inefficiency, bureaucracy, fraud, waste, abuse. So I think that the threat of an ever encroaching and growing government and a higher and higher tax rate where more people's resources are taken, and you have redistribution, which is what Obama told Joe the plumber, and in his moment of candor, that he really wanted to spread the wealth around and redistribute, take wealth from the people that have it and give it to others. And I think that is very dangerous. And I think we need to get back to a situation where people are rewarded for their efforts, where people are able to succeed, where government is very limited and focuses on what they really can do, but gets out of the way and lets people go out there and provide for their families and really seize that American dream. And I think we're seeing some ideas from the president as far as cutting taxes and rolling back regulations that I think are very, very, very positive. And I want to see that continue. The Reagan years were great years for America because he had tremendous tax cuts. He gave people more of their money. They were able to use that money to grow the economy. And I think that's what we need again. And when people have more access to more of their money, they can be, I think, more productive and grow this economy better than government can, which is the worst use of resources. The government cannot use resources as good as the private sector can.
Absolutely. And really, the government doesn't make money. It takes money from the citizens. It's very citizens. And when it says redistribution, it's not redistribution from the super rich. It's redistribution from the majority of Americans, which are lower middle class. And now we're getting rid of a lot of the middle class. So we'll just have the super rich and the super poor. We have the capacity where everyone can really prosper. And I mean really prosper, where we can live a life where we can eat, we can live our best life and use our God-given talents in the world. But that doesn't come from the government making it happen. It comes from all of us making it happen. And I just want to thank you. Now, I want to let everyone know where they can find out more about you, listen to your show, and get your wonderful book, America's Last Chance.
Well, let me just thank you. It's been a great opportunity. Great to visit with you. Really, I think important topics we discussed. People can get all the information about what I'm doing, the TV show, radio show, my new YouTube channel, and my book at my website, which is my name, jeffcrouere.com, and that's CROUERE.com. And I'd love for folks to check it out and subscribe and order the book and let me know what they think. We've gotten good feedback so far, and I'd like as many people to read it as possible because I think it lays out where we've been and where we need to go to really prosper here in this country.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I thank you so much, Jeff, for coming to share your great wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
Hey, it's been my true pleasure. Thank you.
Have you ever dreamt of having a podcast made about your family, about someone you love, or an amazing figure whose story must be preserved for future generations? Now you can do just that with Family Sounds. Our team of podcasting producers use personal and oral history to create high-quality audio documentaries about families and real-life heroes. We will transform your history into a meaningful story that can be shared and enjoyed for years to come. To learn more about Family Sounds and to receive your special discount, visit en.familysounds.net/podcast and enter promo code SAVVY. That is en.familysounds.net/podcast and enter SAVVY.